In February 1945, the Allies pushed closer to the Rhine. On July 6, 1944, in the diary of an American tank gunner in Normandy, one line read, "We fired at it for 10 minutes. 3 rounds hit the frontal armor. 2 struck the turret. It still stood there, motionless, yet invulnerable. When the turret turned toward us, I knew this was the end." This was not a dramatized memory fabricated after the war, but a scene all too common whenever the American Sherman, the U.S. Army's main battle tank, encountered Germany's Tigers or Panthers in the summer of 1944 on the Western Front. That gunner survived, but hundreds of his comrades were not so fortunate. In the brutal battles of Normandy, the Ardennes, and Lorraine, a harsh truth emerged. The M4 Sherman, though numerous and reliable, was still prey before the steel giants of the Wehrmacht. World War II in Europe, especially from the summer of 1943 through late 1944, was marked by the psychological and tactical dominance of German armor. The Panther, with its long-barreled 75mm L-70, the Tigers I with its infamous 88mm KWK-36, and later the Tiger II, King Tiger, clad in fortress-like armor, all cast long shadows over the battlefield. Each appearance sowed terror among Allied armored units. At times, American and British troops nicknamed the Panther the predatory beast and the Tiger the immortal phantom. A grim nickname spread across Allied ranks. The Sherman is a Ronson lighter, lights up every time. The imbalance was stark. On paper, the U.S. had overwhelming superiority. Tens of thousands of Shermans built between 1942 and 1944, unmatched logistics, and a secure industrial base. But in the field, things were far from simple. A Sherman crew often needed to fire 5 or 6 75mm shells to even have a chance of knocking out a Panther, and usually only at close range, where the Sherman itself became an easy target. In contrast, the Tiger's 88mm gun could pierce a Sherman from over 1,500 meters away before American crews could even see their foe. The most devastating impact was not material, but psychological. Reports noted that whenever word spread of a Tiger in the area, entire Sherman platoons would halt, move cautiously, or even avoid engagement altogether. In a Lever home in the autumn of 1944, one American sergeant confessed, "We don't fear the Germans as much as we fear the scream of the 88. One shot is enough to turn 5 men into ashes." In Normandy, this imbalance was even more pronounced. After the D-Day landings, Allied forces pushed into the bocage, dense hedgerows and narrow lanes. Here, Panthers and Tigers had every advantage, ambushing from blind spots, firing, then vanishing. Some American units lost dozens of Shermans in a single day just to eliminate 1 or 2 Tigers. During the Battle of the Bulge in late 1944, when poor weather grounded American aircraft, German armor again demonstrated its terrifying strength. Tiger IIs rolled into Bastogne like mobile fortresses, driving Sherman crews into near panic. Yet seen from a broader perspective, there was a paradox. While Germany produced only about 1,300 Tiger Is, 1,800 Tiger IIs, and nearly 6,000 Panthers during the war, the U.S. fielded over 49,000 Shermans. In theory, sheer numbers should have crushed the enemy. But battlefields are not governed by arithmetic. When 3 or 4 Shermans had to be sacrificed for every Tiger destroyed, strength in numbers became a nightmare for soldiers and commanders alike. Some American officers recognized the crisis early. In a September 1944 report, General Omar Bradley admitted, "We have numerical superiority, but the qualitative disparity is causing mounting losses. A new tank with stronger firepower is urgently needed." The problem was that, while American crews burned in fragile Shermans in the Ardennes, the project for such a tank was still cloaked in secrecy, known only to a handful of senior officers. Behind closed doors at factories and testing grounds in Detroit, Aberdeen, and Fort Knox, American engineers had been engaged in a quiet race since 1942. To design a machine that could stand toe-to-toe with the Tiger and Panther. But on the summer battlefields of 1944, where American soldiers fought desperately with their 75mm Shermans and a handful of upgraded 76mm models, few knew that a new steel warrior was waiting in the wings. The question loomed. While Tigers and Panthers continued to spread terror, and Shermans kept falling company by company, could America unleash in time a weapon capable of changing the balance of the war? And if so, how would it alter the course of the war?
A telegram was sent to the German Army High Command after the winter battles at Leningrad in 1942, in which a commander tersely reported, "The Tiger has been baptized in fire." The enemy fired more than 40 76mm shells at it, but none penetrated the armor. It returned to base with only a few dents on its hull, and behind it lay a column of Soviet tanks in flames. It was more than just a report. It was the herald of a new era. When the Tiger I appeared near Leningrad in the autumn of 1942, it seemed like a steel deity stepping out of legend. Weighing 57 tons, clad in 100mm frontal armor and armed with the 88mm KWK-36, an adaptation of the infamous Flak 88, the Tiger instantly surpassed anything the Soviets, British, or Americans could field. Numbers told the story more powerfully than any praise. A single Tiger could destroy a T-34 or Sherman at ranges beyond 1,500 meters, while the 76.2mm gun of the T-34-76 or the 75mm gun of the Sherman had to close within 500 meters to even have a chance of penetration. In other words, the battle was often decided before the enemy ever saw the Tiger. Soviet soldiers called them immortal beasts, while among American crews the grim saying spread, "If you see a Tiger, don't shoot, call the Air Force." Nor was the Tiger alone. After the defeat at Kursk in 1943, when the Red Army began gaining numerical superiority, Germany unveiled another trump card, the Panther. Though officially classified as a medium tank, the Panther was in reality a new nightmare for the Allies. With 80mm of sloped frontal armor angled at 55 degrees, effectively equal to 120mm of flat plate, and its 75mm KWK-42-70 gun, firing at 935 meters per second, the Panther could destroy any Sherman or T-34 from over 1,000 meters. Meanwhile, the Sherman's shells often bounced harmlessly off the Panther's sloped glacis like rain on stone. One German commander boasted, "One Panther can face 5 Shermans, and usually it wins." The phrase spread like wildfire, becoming a point of pride for the Panzerwaffe and a source of dread for its enemies. In his memoirs, one American tanker in Normandy admitted, "We knew they had only a few Panthers in the sector, but it felt like an entire division was waiting for us." Legendary victories piled up. At Kursk, July 1943, Tigers and Panthers destroyed hundreds of T-34s in the opening days, leaving the Red Army stunned. In Italy, Tigers picked off Shermans on narrow mountain roads like lions hunting prey. And in the Ardennes offensive, December 1944, with fog grounding Allied aircraft, the Tiger II, King Tiger, with 150 mm frontal armor, smashed through American units, sending shutters through Bastogne. One Tiger II crew at Stoumont knocked out 17 Shermans in a single day, returning with little more than scratches on its armor. For German soldiers, panzers were more than weapons. They were walls of faith. In days when American bombs rained on Berlin and the Eastern Front fell back step by step, the Panzer was what made them believe Germany still had a chance. A letter from a Panther crew in Normandy read, "When we rolled out, the villagers cheered. They called us Knights of Steel. Inside the Panther, we felt invincible." By contrast, the American Sherman was almost scorned. Though praised as the workhorse of war, it was thin-skinned, prone to fire, and often could only prevail through sheer numbers or with artillery and air support. While Tigers and Panthers were likened to unstoppable steel storms, the Sherman bore mocking nicknames: Tommy Cooker or Ronson, lights every time. The contrast only deepened the legend of German tank supremacy. That legend was reinforced by figures passed around among German troops. A Tiger averaged 5 to 10 Shermans destroyed before being lost. The Panther, according to German claims, accounted for 156,000 Soviet tanks and self-propelled guns in 1943-1944. Even if exaggerated, such numbers were enough to sustain the belief that the Panzerwaffe was a superhuman force, far above any foe. To their enemies, panzers appeared as gods upon the earth, a strange fusion of engineering, raw power, and terror. A British soldier in Normandy wrote, "When we saw the shadow of a tiger on the village road, it felt like looking at a machine from the future. Every shot we fired was useless." Thus, by late 1944, when Nazi Germany had lost nearly all its allies and its cities lay in ruins, for many German soldiers the last hope still rested on the Panzer. If nothing else could save them, then Tigers and Panthers would at least hold back the Americans and Soviets, if only in their imagination. But what they did not know was that across the Atlantic, in hidden factories, a weapon was being perfected, one that would shatter the Panzer legend in just a few short months.
On March 6, 1945, in the shell-shattered city of Cologne, a German Panther crew lay hidden among the rubble, waiting for their familiar prey, American Shermans. From the start of the campaign, they had repeatedly knocked out enemy tanks with a single round, making U.S. crews shudder each time they entered the city. Through his gun sight, the Panther's gunner spotted an American tank crawling forward along the avenue. Yet something seemed different. The turret was larger, the gun longer and thicker, the hull heavier. Before he could realize the truth, a blinding flash erupted, and with a thunderous impact, a shell tore through the Panther's frontal armor. In an instant, the German tank burst into flames, its crew never given a chance to escape. The moment was captured on film by U.S. Army cameraman Jim Bates, a brief reel with historic meaning. For the first time, the Germans understood that the Sherman was no longer their only opponent. The Americans had unleashed the M26 Pershing, their first true heavy tank, and it carried a grim warning. The age of Tiger and Panther invulnerability was over. The Pershing was not merely different, it was a leap forward. While the Sherman weighed only about 30 tons with armor up to 75 millimeters, the Pershing tipped the scales at nearly 46 tons, with 102 millimeters of frontal armor, angled for even greater protection. But the true game-changer was its weapon, the 90mm M3 gun. This was not the feeble 75mm or 76mm of the Sherman, but a weapon tested against aircraft and heavy armor, capable of piercing a Panther's armor from over 1,000 meters and even penetrating a King Tiger under favorable conditions. Superiority also lay in its technology. The Pershing featured a gun stabilizer, allowing more accurate fire on the move, something nearly impossible for the Sherman. Its interior was more spacious, its transmission more advanced, giving crews both safety and comfort. For U.S. tankers accustomed to riding in Shermans that burned so easily, climbing into a Pershing was like stepping from a fragile truck into a mobile fortress. This difference turned the first encounters into nightmares for the Germans. In Cologne, a Panther was destroyed with a single shot, right in the heart of the urban ambush grounds it once dominated. A week later, at Remagen, where the Americans seized the bridge over the Rhine, a Pershing met a Tiger I head-on. The result? The Tiger was penetrated, its crew killed almost instantly. News spread quickly through panzer units. The Americans have a new tank, a long-barreled Sherman. It kills Tigers. The initial reaction was sheer bewilderment. For over 2 years, German crews had grown used to Shermans doing little more than scratching their paint at range. Now all tactical assumptions were overturned. A German officer on the Western Front reported, "We encountered an American tank never seen before. Its gun pierced Panther armor from unexpected distance. The men believe the Americans now have a super tank." Though only about 20 Pershings had been deployed in February-March 1945, they struck directly at the Germans' most fragile point, their belief in technical superiority. It was not merely a matter of machines, it was a psychological shock. In the minds of Tiger and Panther crews, they had always been hunters, and the Sherman prey. But with the Pershing's arrival, the roles reversed. No one could be certain anymore. When sighting an American tank in the distance, was it a weak Sherman or a Pershing that could fire back and destroy them in a heartbeat? That gnawing doubt planted fear in every crewman's mind, and in war, morale can matter more than firepower. The strategic contrast was equally stark. While the Panzerwaffe was shrinking, short on fuel, short on ammunition, and being squeezed from both east and west, the U.S. introduced the Pershing at precisely the right moment. They did not need thousands, just a few dozen were enough to prove one fact. America could now build tanks equal to, even superior to, Germany's. That was the death knell for the pride that had sustained the Wehrmacht for so long. For American crews, the Pershing brought a new sense of confidence. One gunner recalled after Cologne, "For the first time, we didn't feel like moving targets. We were the hunters." That confidence spread quickly, boosting the morale of units weary from the bloody losses of the Ardennes. For the Germans, shock turned into a haunting question. Could the Tiger and Panther still uphold their fearsome reputations? If even their technical edge had vanished, what could possibly stop the Americans now, that they were surging across the Rhine with the full weight of their industry behind them? In that moment, everything changed. The Pershing did not need to destroy thousands of German tanks. By its very presence, it shattered the illusion of invincibility, and that was the most dangerous weapon of all. But one question still lingered. Could the Panzerwaffe hold its ground? Would the legend of the Tiger and Panther fight on to the end, or fall before this new challenger?
On March 7, 1945, the thunder of artillery echoed along the banks of the Rhine. The gray waters trembled with each blast, reflecting the flames rising from the burning city of Remagen. And then, before the advancing U.S. Army, the unthinkable appeared. The Ludendorff Bridge still stood intact. In the final days of the war, as the Germans demolished nearly every bridge across the Rhine to halt the Allies, the survival of this massive steel span was something no one had dared to expect. For a moment, the American commanders stood frozen. Then the order rang out, "Take the bridge at all costs." Troops surged forward. From the far bank, the harsh chatter of MG-42s cut through the air, bullets whistling past as men dropped across the railway tracks. Smoke blinded their vision, but still they pressed on, step by step, through the storm of fire. A soldier of the U.S. 9th Division later recorded in his diary, "We didn't think we'd survive, but behind us was an entire corps, an entire America. If this bridge went down, how many more would die trying to cross the river? We had to run, even if it meant dying on the steel beams right then and there." On the German side, combat engineers had already wired the bridge with explosives. As the first Pershing tank rolled onto the span, the charges were detonated. A thunderous roar shook the earth. Smoke billowed high into the sky, and for a few agonizing seconds no one knew what had happened. When the haze lifted, the Ludendorff still stood. Sections of the deck had collapsed. Holes gaped in the flooring, but the main structure endured. For a heartbeat, silence. Then cheers erupted from the Americans, while German defenders fell into stunned disbelief. A golden chance to halt the advance had vanished. Field Marshal von Rundstedt muttered bitterly, "A strategic catastrophe. The Remagen Bridge will shorten the war." What followed was 10 days of savage destruction. The Germans threw everything they had left at the crossing. Hundreds of artillery pieces pounded the span, shaking the Rhine with their blasts. Squadrons of Me-262 jet fighters, freshly deployed, streaked in desperate attack runs. Even V-2 rockets, the terror weapon once aimed at London, were fired at Remagen. Nothing worked. The Ludendorff shuddered, groaned, but refused to fall. In those 10 days, the Germans lost over 11,000 men in futile counterattacks around Remagen. Pilots were shot from the sky, tank crews annihilated, entire companies swallowed in smoke and flame. One surviving soldier wrote to his family, "We fired until the last shell, but still the Americans poured across. Each day we lived only to be target practice for their guns. There is no escape." The Americans, too, paid dearly. The bridge groaned under the weight of tanks and infantry. On March 17th, after enduring 10 days of fire, the Ludendorff finally gave way, plunging 28 American soldiers into the icy Rhine. But it was already too late. More than 25,000 men with tanks and heavy artillery had crossed to the east bank. A firm bridgehead had been secured, and pontoon bridges now carried the endless flood of men and machines into Germany's heart. The moment at Remagen was more than a battle. It was the collapse of Germany's last illusion. From the Rhine onward, no river wide enough, no fortress strong enough could halt the Allied tide. resistance was stripped of all hope, leaving only despair. The shock reverberated through Berlin. Hitler raged in fury, dismissing generals, ordering the execution of engineers responsible for Remagen for treason. But no decree could change the truth. Germany was spent, and now even the Rhine, the final symbol of defense, had been breached. A diary recovered from a downed German pilot in those days carried his last words. "We fight like blind men, with no fuel, no comrades in the skies. My heart tells me the nation is dead, but my hands must still guide the plane. If I do not return tomorrow, do not weep. Everything is already over." The sounds of Remagen were not only explosions, not only steel tearing and men screaming. They were the shattering echoes of an empire's fall. From the desperate crescendo of resistance to the crushing realization that the enemy had crossed, it all condensed into one bitter truth. The war was ending, and Nazi Germany's defeat was now irreversible.
As the gun smoke settled over the shattered streets of Cologne, as American columns surged across the Rhine, and as the final white flag was raised over the dome of the Reichstag, a question lingered in the air. Had the M26 Pershing arrived too late? And what was its true meaning? For the crews of Sherman tanks who had watched comrades burn under the fire of Tigers and Panthers, the Pershing was a belated answer to a nightmare. To them, the 90mm gun was not just a weapon, but a steel promise of justice, proof that they no longer had to charge into battle with a hopeless disadvantage. One veteran recalled, "Inside a Pershing, we felt we had a chance to survive, no longer just a target waiting to be hunted." For American generals, the Pershing carried a broader significance. It proved that U.S. industry, long celebrated for sheer numbers, could also create machines equal to, or even superior to, Nazi Germany's proudest designs. If the Sherman was the symbol of war by mass production, then the Pershing was the declaration that America could win not only through numbers, but through technological progress. Yet the cost of delay was immense. For 2 years, tens of thousands of American tankers and infantry had fallen to the fire of Tigers and Panthers. Thousands of Shermans lay blackened across the fields of Normandy, the edges of the Ardennes, and the crossroads of French villages. The history of armored warfare was written not only in steel, but in the blood of men sent forward with weapons that lagged behind. The Pershing was thus both a triumph of engineering and a silent indictment of hesitation in strategic decision-making. Its legacy did not end in 1945. From the Pershing flowed the lineage of the Patton series, M46, M47, M58, and M60. Tanks that not only stood guard over Western Europe against the shadow of the Soviet Union, but also fought in conflicts across the globe. In their tracks and armor, one can still trace the outline of the Pershing, the tank that opened the road to a new era. For Germany and for the world, the Pershing left a bitter lesson. No weapon is powerful enough to reverse a war once the industry behind it has collapsed. Tigers and Panthers could terrify on the battlefield, but they could not erase the fact that America built Shermans faster than Germany could destroy them, and now had unleashed the Pershing as well. Many German officers understood in that moment, we lost in the factories before we lost on the battlefield. Looked at more broadly, the Pershing reflected a law of the 20th century.
Modern war was no longer merely the clash of men, but the struggle of systems, industry, logistics, science. Guns and tanks were only the final expression of vast supply chains. A single weapon might shift the rhythm of a battle, but only an industrial base could decide the war. And in that sense, the Pershing was a punctuation mark. It closed the chapter in which American tank design trailed behind. It opened another where America would lead in armored technology, a position it has held ever since. Yet there is another more human echo that rises from the ruins. The young crews, American and German alike, ground to pieces between the wheels of history. The Pershing triumphed technologically, but it could not erase the countless anonymous graves across Europe. Perhaps only in the silence after the guns do we understand that every weapon, however advanced, ultimately extends the roll call of the dead. That lesson carries forward even now. Every time a nation unveils a new weapon, every time men measure range, armor, or firepower, it is worth remembering that behind those figures lie the lives of soldiers. The Pershing, for all its glory and might, was no exception. Looking back at World War II, some remember the Pershing as the first American tank capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Panzerwaffe. Others see it as a symbol of U.S. industry. Still others view it as proof of a delay paid for in blood and ashes. But all agree on one thing. The Pershing changed how the world understood armored warfare, opening a new chapter where steel and technology outweighed spirit and courage alone. And within that vast canvas remains one haunting image: the Pershing rolling through Cologne, turret turning slowly, its long black barrel pointing ahead. Behind it, Sherman smolder. Before it, ruins stretch across the horizon. Around it, the shadows of a dying era, a symbol of both an ending and a beginning. For in the end, in a war of steel and blood, it was not spirit, but industry that sealed the fate of nations.